Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and today I have Dr. Deanna Minich, Ph.D., joining me. We're going to be talking all about color and food today, but first, a little bit about Deanna. I have her bio here. Dr. Deanna Minich, MS, Ph.D., CNS, Certified Functional Medicine Practitioner, is a nutrition researcher, educator, and functional medicine trained clinician with a unique approach to nutrition that combines physiology and psychology. She has served on the Institute of Functional Medicine's Nutrition Advisory Board and Curriculum Committee, in addition to being a faculty member teaching nutrition for the Advanced Practice module for environmental health. She served on the board of directors of the American Nutrition Association. Her academic background is in nutritional science, including a master's degree in Human Nutrition and Dietetics from University of Illinois. She also studied in the Netherlands, receiving a Ph.D. in conjunction with her academic degrees and extensive teaching experience at the university level. She is a fellow of the American College of Nutrition and a certified nutrition specialist. Dr. Minich has over 20 years of experience working in both the food and dietary supplement industries and serves as an advisor to various food, academic, and health organizations, and has more than 50 published scientific articles in journals such as Nutrients, Journal of Nutrition and Metabolism, and Nutrition Reviews. She teaches for the graduate program in Human Nutrition and Functional Medicine at the University of Western States. She is the author of 6 books on nutrition, wellness, and psychology, and is passionate in helping others to live well using therapeutic lifestyle changes. You can find her at deannaminich.com. Wow, Deanna, welcome to the show. You are certainly an authority on this topic, and I'm so happy to have you here.
Wow, thank you, Liz. It's so nice to be here with you. Thanks for reading that whole big bio.
Mine as
I hope we
well.
still have people with us.
Yes, I know that's quite extensive. So let's dive right in. What led you to focus on color?
Mm. Wow, I could go all the way back to when I remember I was 13 and I was growing up in the 70s and 80s. And at that time, I remember even having a rainbow shirt, one of those it's a white long sleeve shirt with a rainbow that goes across the chest and down the arms. I was so tuned into color at some level. I mean, I liked to wear bright colors when I was a teenager, but I didn't really grok what was what this fascination with color was. So then fast forward into my 20s, I had a number of health issues. I had gynecological issues. So I had endometriosis, I had a blocked fallopian tube on the left side, just period problems every month. I would have hormonal imbalance, and then that was coupled to gut health issues. So I was in the final years of working on my doctorate, and I remember just having a lot of stress. And whenever you have stress, or at least whenever I did, it's like the things in the body become more sensitive and more sensitized. And I remember one weekend I just went to the art store and I bought this big roll of white paper, and then I bought a bunch of acrylic paints, and I spent that weekend immersing myself into bright colors, especially the colors I remember from this one painting. It was huge. It was yellow, red, and with a black outline. It looked like a big amoeba. And I just put it on my apartment wall. And then something really started to connect for me. I realized that every time I would get feeling kind of in that state of feeling emotional, I would go to color and I would start painting, and I would use sometimes big pieces of paper, smaller pieces of paper. And I feel like in those situations, if I look back now, what was happening was it's almost like my emotions had to come out in some way. And the way that served me best was through color and through some amorphous art form, like on this piece of paper. So nonverbal, just through color. And then from that point on, it was my husband who later made mention, after looking at my paintings and observing me paint. He's like, Deanna, I think you're painting your ovaries and uterus and putting them all over the house. And my paintings were in a typical shape. They were usually with spirals and circles, and a bunch of them were orange and yellow and pink and gold. And I soon realized that he was right. Like, I couldn't see into myself from the paintings. It was just like something I had to do. But when he was able to witness what I was doing, much like somebody might read their poem and then mirror back to you what they heard. And then it's like, oh, that's what's really going on. So when he said that, I decided to start painting with intention to communicate with my body. And eventually, I believe that all of that artwork and all of that connection to color was part of my healing journey, which ultimately all of those issues that I was working with had resolved. And I can't say it was
Wow.
directly from the art or the color, but I must say, like, once Mark, my husband, tuned in and gave me that perspective that, Deanna, maybe this is healing for you. Your body is expressing itself. It was like, oh my gosh, I think you're right. So then I became intentional. I said, even when I had issues, I remember I had an issue with my hand. I decided I'm going to start painting my hand. So it became my connection at a deep level, like my own personal modality.
Wow, that is amazing. And what a great example of where attention goes, energy flows, right? And how you
Yeah.
brought in that creativity, really using that creativity, which you say on your website is a lost art, into your healing process. I think that's phenomenal. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that's impacted your research into color and food, and your book?
I'm so glad that you asked that. That's like my favorite question whenever anybody asks me about creativity. One of the things, Liz, is that as I was going through my life, I realized I lived a lot of my life experience through my head, very intellectual, a lot of academic training, always trying to troubleshoot, problem solve, and feeling like that needed to come from how I thought about things. And it wasn't until the introduction with color and art that I realized, wait a minute, do we have a lost sense of ourselves through creative expression? So I began to use this for myself, and then I began to use this with clients. And then as I moved out of the one-on-one client encounter and moved into more groups, I began to bring creativity through color, through art, through so many different vehicles, even food, which I was trained in as nutrition science, right? Bringing eating the rainbow into that experience, I realized, oh my gosh, so many people even beyond me, are having a deficiency of creative expression. And in fact, it's almost like two things that I came up against. Number one, people would say, I'm not creative, right? That would be the first limiting belief. And then the second one was, I have no time to be creative. I've got to like survive. I got to like put food on the table. I've got, I need to feel safe. I need to have a job. I'm barely getting enough sleep. I have no time to be creative. So those were the two things that I felt that people were coming up against. And those two, what I would say, contexts, the fact that they were blocking that for themselves, it's almost like they were missing out on this potential healing and where they could go to being more creative, more flowing, more receptive, have unlocking their potential. And actually, even for the people that were stressed out that don't feel like, or they continue to feel like, oh, I just don't have enough time,
Mhm.
being creative and having these pauses actually gave them a sense of more timelessness. So it was kind of antithetical to what their experience was, that once they started to bring in the creativity, more things could flow, more doors would open. And if you think about it, the healing arts, what is healing? It's an art as well as a science. So I love bringing creativity into every single thing I do, even into my daily routine. I think it's essential. It's like a nutrient. If we're missing creativity, it's like we have a deficiency in our mental emotional sphere.
Agree. And even like when you're being creative with food, right? You're going into, I almost want to say, a meditative state. I know when I'm in my garden or I'm being creative in the kitchen, it really takes me to another space and I'm able to spend
Yeah.
time with myself and actually process.
Yes, and I'm glad that you bring up that aspect of food, because what I soon began to realize is that there are probably, the way I see it, there are at least seven kind of creatives that live within us. There's a food creative, just like you described, somebody who's really earthy, gets into food, the creation, preparation of food. There's the flowing creative, which I was embodying with whenever I felt moved and flowing, that creativity needed to go somewhere. So drama, art forms, singing, dance, like anything that could flow that out. Then there's the thinking creative. Many people who are very heady and thought, like into strategy and thinking through, they tend not to think themselves as creative. Yet we can be very creative in our thinking. Then there's the movement creative, our body sense of being creative, the people that are into dance, into hiking. There's the speaking creative. So those creatives that are really into words and how you say things. I have a really good colleague. His name is Reverend Dr. Robert Jerome Thomas, and he is definitely a speaking creative. He lets go through his words, through that is his vehicle to have his soul be connected in. There's the visual creative, and then there's, I would say, the I call it kind of the awe-inspiring creative, where you become creative through mystical experiences. And that could just be looking at the nighttime sky, being at a concert where you're hearing the music and you're part of all of these people, or, maybe you're on an ocean front. We can be inspired to create through so many different venues. So, and some of us are tugged by more of these than others. And I think we are multifaceted in our
Mhm.
creativity, but usually there's one that is tugging us along. Just like with Reverend Thomas, it's like really, his prose, his words. For me, it's my painting, it's the flowing creative. Maybe for you, you're really resonant with the food creative. So whatever it is, and it may
Mhm.
change. It may go from the food creative and then you move into like the visual creative, where it's like, okay, imagery, pictures of food versus the making of food. So
Absolutely.
it can go anywhere. It has no bounds.
I love how they follow the chakras too. And when you're talking about, the one mentor of yours who really speaks through his voice, I really see the fifth chakra. And that also goes along with how you color coded the food, because I know being an energy healer, eating for your chakras is a thing. So let's, kind of dive into that a little bit and how it corresponds to the energetic system.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because as a scientist, oftentimes, we need to find language to go into the non-science world, or at least to bridge that gap. And to
Mhm.
me, what are chakras? My first book in 2009 was Chakra Foods. It was looking at foods from the chakra system, right? But then I was like, how do I talk about this in a general sense? So I actually have I call it an operating system of color. Like there's a color code. And while I am trained in chakras and energy work, and I'm a yoga practitioner and all of that, I use just a little bit of some tweaks to my own perception and what I've experienced with other people in using these different colors of food. So would you like to go? I can tour us through the colors and then the foods
Yeah, let's do
maybe
that too,
quickly.
because I think when we put it in different language, it reaches more people.
Yes. Okay. So red, typically we think of the root, what is grounding, safe, secure, evokes a sense of community, a sense of, safety. So red in a physiological sense could mean inflammation. And if we have inflammation, a little bit is good. Too much is not so good, right? It's kind of like where a little bit of red can be good, but too much red can feel overpowering and evokes reaction. That's why we have a red stoplight. We have a red stop sign. Things that are red in the environment can be dangerous, like poisonous berries or a red mushroom. So red is a color that I would say spans, I mean, each color really spans the whole spectrum, but we can have inflammatory red. Like some people are sensitive to nightshades or they get a histamine response. And other people can benefit from red colored foods that give us certain phytochemicals that quell inflammation, that quell the immune response. So red foods, there are so many different ones, strawberries, raspberries, cranberries, beets. I mean, you name it. Usually what I do is I stick to plant foods because I'm talking about the phytochemicals.
Mhm.
However, in so doing, I'm not omitting other dietary patterns. I'm not dogmatic, but I do focus on plants through this system. So any kind of plant food that's red.
Nice.
And then orange is more of carotenoids, beta carotene. I think of when I think of orange, it's a very warm, playful, nourishing color, and it connects to compounds in nature that would fortify things like the reproductive system. So even in the a woman's ovary, there's a concentration of carotenoids, and some of those are thought to drive the process of ovulation or
Mhm.
fertility. Even in sperm, the head of the sperm can be packed with these carotenoids for protection and to ensure survivability of the sperm. So orange to me is kind of like warm, playful, kind of sexy. It opens up the connection with fertility, and also the connection with things that are fat in the body. So fat tissue, adipose tissue, is connected to hormones. So this is a orange I connect to hormones for a variety of reasons. And also when it comes to food, things like yams and things that are orange, even carrots, can help to modify some of the metabolism of hormones. Now, it's not exclusive to orange, but as a scientist, I think in patterns. What's the pattern recognition? Nature doesn't work in strict boxes, but I'm looking at like, where's the clustering?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then yellow, I think most people get way too much in the way of processed food yellow, cakes,
Mhm.
cookies, breads, toast, crackers, things of that nature. And I think, Liz, in a way, it's a way to get energy. And if we think elementally, yellow is a connection to fire. It's a connection to the digestive tract, the solar plexus.
Mm.
And we're often trying to renew that center and to get more energy, to get more fire, to make our day more productive, the mental energy. However, the things that can drive that process a bit better would be natural yellow. Ginger creates gastromotility. We get movement in the gut from ginger. Lemon and lemon bioflavonoids can help in the process of metabolic detoxification through the liver. Pineapple, which contains enzymes to help with breakdown of food. So there can be ways that we get good, healthy yellow foods to help us with our inner digestive fire.
Love that, especially ginger.
I know lately I've been drinking a lot of ginger tea. This morning I made tea with some fresh squeezed lemon, ginger, honey, 3 yellows that work
Nice.
really well together, right? And help the digestive tract. Then there's green. Green foods tend to be good for the heart. So if we look at leaves, so kale, spinach, if you look up close to lettuce, it's almost like we can see their vasculature, right? And coincidentally, many of the things that are in green foods are things that support healthy vessel health. Things like folate help to drive down things like homocysteine, which can be potentially damaging to the vasculature. Also things like magnesium, which is important for the heart function, the electrical activity. Dietary nitrates, which are in these green foods to help with the expansion of the blood vessels. So
Mhm.
green is all about opening, expansion, and circulation of that expansion.
Nice.
And we tend to get a lot of green in our daily eating. There have been surveys, are people eating their colors? Green tends to be pretty good, but if you think of nature, we live on a blue-green planet, so we have more choices for green. Doesn't mean that we should overlook that because each of the greens are very different in what they
Mhm.
provide. And then
And
there's blue-green. Yeah, go ahead.
a lot of people get in ruts. They're eating a lot of pasta, a lot of white, brown foods. I know if I get into a rut, I'm eating like emotional eating, right? It's
Yeah.
pasta. So the only color I'm getting is like red sauce or red salsa or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Brown, yellow, and white foods. This is what is seen as an inflammatory, high aging, high oxidative stress way of eating. It's an effort energetically to get something quick, right? But in return, we're actually, to get that quick energy, we're having to give, and we're depleting our resources to move that through us from a metabolic perspective. So even though they may give a short-term return, they're asking a lot for that energy to be taken in. But yeah, it's true. When people get into food ruts, I often say it's like a life rut. What's going on? Where do you need to shake things up and transform and bring in more color? Because each of the colors has its own medicine or healing to it.
Yes. I know recently I've been drawn to blackberries and blueberries, and I have all these blackberries frozen in my freezer. I'm like, what can I do to these in midwinter, right? Where I can incorporate more of those into my daily diet. Yeah.
Well, one idea might be a compote. very simply to take those blackberries and just to warm them up a bit and to let a little bit of that, especially in the winter when it's cold outside, how do we bring how do we bring the fire element to foods that might be perceived as cooling? So
Yes.
I just know, just recently I made a blueberry blackberry compote for breakfast together with the other foods that we were having, but it was just so just nourishing. Like it tasted good. And you don't have to add any sugar to that. It brings in a bit of sweetness and tartness in combination.
Yeah.
So blue-green is the color, as you pointed out before, about the throat chakra. So the speaking creative. And blue-green, there aren't many blue-green foods, if at all. So the way that I see this is that if we're thinking of the throat area, it's how we take things in. It's mindful eating. And when I think of blue-green foods, being that there aren't any in nature, I have thought about sea plants, which can be green foods growing in the blue ocean. And sea plants can be great vehicles of different minerals to help support thyroid hormone activity and function. So that's where I think of thyroid. What do we need for healthy thyroid? And also, what do we need to omit? Because the thyroid is very susceptible to endocrine disruption and things that can be in our food. Blue purple, which you're drawn to, is about the brain. There's great science to suggest that blue purple foods like blueberries, even Concord grape juice, can be important for things like learning, memory, and mood. So
That
when
makes
we're
sense.
craving those things, it's like, what is our brain requiring for nourishment, right? And what we see is that there may actually even be some neuronal effects. So blueberries might even help with promoting some of the growth factors to help your brain create more neurons. Like blueberries,
Mm.
there's so much good science on blueberries. They've been very well studied. Now, blackberries, if I were to choose between blackberries and blueberries, I would actually choose blackberries. It's a deeper hue, which means more of the pigments, and you
Mm-hmm.
get more fiber with blackberries because of each of the individual particulates of the blackberry versus the blueberry, because a lot of those phytochemicals are in the skin. So blueberry is very simple skin, whereas blackberry has very convoluted, complex. So if you were to stretch that out, you're getting most likely more than you would from a blueberry.
Cool.
And then the final one is white. I have it listed here as lavender just because white doesn't show very nicely, but lavender, back to the white, is about clearing, cleansing. It's about omitting the white processed foods, much like we were talking about yellow. So omitting the white flour, white salt, white sugar, and moving into a place of purity, clarity, refinement with our eating, with our body, and connecting to our body in a non-physical way, perhaps through whatever's deemed important and essential for us, but fasting. Maybe it's just not eating close to bedtime. Excuse me. Or, maybe we need a little bit more in the way of detoxification in order to reset for the seasonal change. So that's how I see the colors in their foods.
Nice. So how can we go about bringing more of these colors into our daily lives? And then how can that affect us?
Okay, well, in many ways, I've been speaking to more of the physical aspect of color, but
Mm-hmm.
what we see from the science is that, excuse me, tickle my throat. What we see is that more fruits and vegetables align to better mental health, and with greater number of even fruit servings, we see greater life satisfaction. With more fruits and vegetables, there's an association with creativity, curiosity, less psychological distress. So how do we get the rainbow? Well, you can do it like my biggest meal of the day is my breakfast. So I'll just talk to what I do specifically. Like this morning, I actually took a picture of my plate. It was rainbow. Because I did have blueberries, I had pomegranate, which is a little bit of red, I had all the colors. So I try to front load my breakfast meal because that's when I eat the most and that's when I have most opportunity to bring in the rainbow. Now, for some people, they don't eat so much for breakfast. They may have more limited food choices So in that case, to spread the rainbow out throughout the day, maybe for breakfast, you get red, yellow, white. For lunch, you might get green and blue, purple. Maybe you get red again, you get some orange. As long as you can just get at least some food that has that color of the rainbow throughout the day. Now, I didn't talk about brown. Brown, tan, beige goes on that yellow spectrum. So it fits in with digestive health. And typically brown foods contain fiber. Not always, like cocoa, I tend to put up with blue and purple because of the flavonoids and the brain effects. So that's why I have some permutations that are just a little bit different based on what I know of the science and the experiential effects.
Mhm.
So the way for people to get the rainbow is throughout the day, in a meal, or even throughout a week. I do a lot of fun groups online where we have I do different programs, but like one of them was 7 days where we had a color focus every day. So on the first day, we focused on red, like just focus on all the different red colored foods that you could get. Because, when you mentioned food ruts, that's such a really good point because
Mhm.
people tend towards the same foods. I remember talking with my sister some time ago and she's like, oh yeah, I get red, I get tomatoes. And I was thinking, there's a spectrum of red foods, right? All the ones that we talked about before. So how do we get variety in a color on its own? So, and then the next day of the program would be orange. It's like, okay, how many orange foods can you get today? Can you even drink a tea that has an orange color, like a turmeric kind of tea? And that counts too. I want to mention to your audience that it's not just fruits and vegetables that's part of that plant kingdom, but it's teas, herbs, spices, especially spices. It's nuts, seeds, whole grains for people that do them. It's the whole juices. It's
Mhm.
the composite of all the different permutations that plants end up in our food and beverage supply. So I think from that perspective, another program we did that was really fun was to count the number of diverse plants that you can get in a week. So
That's
the general, yeah, well, the general benchmark is to try to get about 50 unique plant foods in 7 days. So we did this as a group exercise just to see how, what foods are you eating through the week? And, I remember one woman got over 200 unique plant foods in a week, which is great. I think I got like 120. So it just gives your intention a chance to focus on variety, and dietary diversity is a really big deal. We see that dietary diversity is connected to nutritional status. It's connected to so many things. It's connected to mental health. It's connected to lowering toxic load, helping the gut microbiome, which indirectly impacts the immune system. So even being diverse, like if you say, oh, this whole color thing, I don't know if I could do that. Well, aim for diversity. If you can change it up, get different spices every day, that all counts towards your 50.
I love that. And it takes us out of our comfort zone.
Yeah. When you move out of those ruts, food ruts mean life ruts mean food ruts. So if you're trying something new, you're going to get out of your comfort zone and grow those neurons and help your heart and be more metabolically flexible. Overall, it's good to change things up.
I love that. And you had mentioned mental health too. So it's the beginning of the year. How do we eat for our mood? We're thinking, eating, living in color. How do we direct it into something specific?
Well, colorful foods make for colorful moods. There is a connection between the foods we eat and the state of mind that we have and our emotions. So, and I think that it's not just food alone. I do think we have to look at how we live, because how we live is how we eat, and how we eat is how we live. They really tie in together. So
Mhm.
if we're not sleeping well, the next day we're probably not going to eat very well. We might be more prone to binging on more starchy carbohydrates to get quick energy, because we don't feel the energy because we haven't had good sleep. So and then we go to bed and then we don't quite feel, well suited, we're not well rested from the day. And so we get in a cycle. So the cycle can be broken just through one meal. Like if we just say, okay, just for this one day, I'm going to aim for the rainbow. I'm going to aim to eat different colors, and I'm just going to observe how I feel. I do think that we may see a mood shift, and a mood shift can create a behavior change. So it's all related, right? Like how
Right.
you feel in your body. If you're inflamed, psychologically, that can cause some changes in mood. Those changes in mood can then impact and further change the physical body. And they go back and forth, back and forth. They're all intertwined. So if we can break that feedback at some level just with one meal, and one meal has great potential for like 4 to 6 hours after you eat it, you are changing biochemically through that meal, especially postprandially, that 4 to 6 hour window. So
Wow.
that can give you a break from feeling kind of like you're in the doldrums. And often movement, I do think that we need movement in many ways. We need movement of the mind. We need movement of the heart through emotions and circulation. We need movement of the gut. So many times, I think this is more clinical experience and not science per se, but I've observed clinically that when people are constipated, they have gut issues, they have bloating, they have acid reflux, they have indigestion, they have gas, they have irregular bowel pattern, whatever it is, there's a mood issue. And sometimes it's not just some nebulous depression. The depressive symptoms, the anxiety that people may feel may actually be connected to something very physiologic and physical, and very much so looking at the gut, because as we know, and
Hmm.
our gut microbiome is pretty powerful, and they outnumber us. They outnumber the cells of our own bodies. So much of them will determine how we feel, how we digest, how we remember. There's even a connection with cognition there. I mean, it's huge. So focus on your gut. When you want to change your mood state, work with a practitioner who understands gut health from a physical, emotional, mental aspect. And you may need several practitioners. One practitioner might be really good at the physical. They can get you on things to remove certain pathogens like viruses, mold, yeast, parasites, whatever it is. They're really good at that. Then you may need emotional, mental type of support through other practitioners to help with because the gut is like the first brain. It's the feeling part of us. So there are a lot of feelings, and what we don't feel, and this I know happened with me, especially when I had a lot of gynecological gut issues, they were connected. And I think that what I was feeling wasn't getting expressed, and it was getting stuffed down. And when I opened myself to art and color, I liberated a lot of that pent up emotion that I was feeling bad about, like whether it was anger, sadness, or disappointment and rage, just letting that out so that my body didn't have to hold that, which is a lot for the body to hold. It's got to go somewhere, right?
Right. Yeah, it often goes into our gut or our joints or something like that. And the microbiome actually helps with various other things too, including our immunity.
Oh,
So why
yeah.
don't we talk a little bit about boosting our immunity since we're going into the cold and flu season right now?
Well, 60 to 70% of our immune system is actually housed in the gut. If you think of the gut, it's not just a tube. The gut has an actual muscular layer. So that's why it can move things through, because it's got the muscles. It has an endocrine layer, so it's very hormonal. So after you eat, you release so much in the way of neurotransmitter and hormonal signals to the body. And you also just have like this physical layer of the cells themselves. And so sometimes those cells can be leaky because we're taking in certain things and they're not connected in integrity. So now you've got certain particles coming in. So when it comes to your immune system, you want a tight gut barrier. You want that integrity because you don't want pathogens getting in and kind of getting in between the cracks. And you don't want undigested food getting in between the cracks. That food needs to be properly digested. Those invaders of pathogens need to be prevented from entering the body's systemic circulation, because once it's in the systemic circulation, now your body has to work hard and give up its resources to ensure that there isn't an immune insult. So yeah, the immune system, if you want to focus on your immunity, and this is why, when do people get sick? They get sick when they start eating certain foods. You know, the holiday season, being on the heels of the holidays, people are trying to get back on track. But for the month of December, November, there's a lot of eating off of what they normally eat, a lot more sugar, which can impact the immune system, more alcohol, just foods that wouldn't necessarily align to proper gut health, right?
Right.
And then also maybe not sleeping as well. So it's good to take inventory of all of the things that would be implicated in better gut health, because when you build the gut, I know that, you know, people feel different, you know, their symptoms are different. In functional medicine, we talk about a 5R approach, removing the offenders, because, you know, if you have Helicobacter pylori or some microorganism that is overriding a lot of the healthy bacteria, you know, you have to sometimes eradicate, right? So remove. The
Mhm.
second aspect of the 5R program is replacing. Sometimes you have to replace with digestive enzymes, acids, bile, whatever is missing, because sometimes when we're stressed out, we don't produce enough of those things. And then we look at reinoculating, we look at probiotics, we look at reestablishing a healthy milieu in the gut. Sometimes we need an additional army of microorganisms to come in and repopulate so that we get a reset. And then repair. You know, the gut turns over every 5 to 7 days. Basically, every week you have a new gut lining, right?
Wow.
So we have the ability to repair that gut. We get another chance. We get it over and over again. So what do we need to build that gut lining? Well, we need good, healthy proteins. We need good, healthy fats and oils. We need certain vitamins. We need zinc. You know, again, a skilled practitioner can really work with somebody to move them through exactly what they need for that. And then the final R is rebalance, relax, because stress can also create leaky gut. It's not just foods. And an acute bout of stress, and there's science on this, we can start to see changes in intestinal permeability. Things become more leaky in the gut just after stress. So we don't want to discount stress, but many times it's very difficult for people to just say, okay, I'm going to block out all stress. What we can be working on are some of the physical aspects to bolster our digestion and our overall gut function so that we can better accommodate stress. And then we can start to find strategies to work with that stress. So yeah, the 5R approach, functional medicine providers are typically trained in how to move a patient, move a client through that process.
Wow, that's amazing. I don't think I've ever heard of that before. So thank you for bringing that up and pointing it out. And that
Sure.
way, you know, our listeners can go out and kind of ask that question before making that appointment. Like, are you familiar with the 5R approach? Especially if they're stressed out, their adrenals are shot, and they need a reboot, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And sometimes it's not so much the adrenals. The adrenals are at the end. It's like the caboose. It's like, what's driving the train? Is it our perception, our mind, our overall framework of a situation? So working with, you know, and that's why, I mean, even me being in the healing arts, I mean, I still have a team of healers that I go to,
Mhm.
you know, because we always have blind spots, even the most savvy of us, where we say, hey, wait a minute, I've done everything. Well, there just might be something to get creative and curious about that can bring a whole new way of thinking into how we perceive our physical, emotional, mental, spiritual states.
Yes, I agree. Having that healing team is really important. All
Yeah.
those different aspects. Yes, 100%. So we've begun the year. I got an email from you just recently about the 3 predictions for health trends in 2023. You want to like kind of dive into that a little bit for us and tell us what you think?
Well, one of them we've already talked about, which is gut health. I don't think that gut health is going away. It's still very top of mind. It's going to amplify. It's going to always be there
Yeah.
because we've learned so much about the gut. As a counterpart to the gut, I think that we're going to be looking more at skin. Skin and gut are very interrelated because of the nervous system connection. So with the gut health, one of the things I talked about in the newsletter was the emergence of postbiotics. So what we're finding is that it may not just be the microorganisms in the gut, but it's what they're making that is changing the environment in the gut. So these
Hmm.
are called postbiotics. So that's number one. So gut health is not going away. Number two, it's really fascinating, but muscle. muscle strength, muscle health, grip strength, we're starting to find that there's so many other benefits to muscle. It's not just about being fit and buff and looking good and having definition. Muscle signals to our metabolic web. And so we see that probiotics, gut health can inform muscle. There are associations with vitamin D levels in muscle. If you think about it, outside of the skin and the gut, together with those two, especially, muscle is one of the largest organs, and it is a receiver of insulin. So if we don't have muscle strength and stability, we can have issues with our metabolism, our blood sugar, our stress response, which taps into our blood sugar response. And further, it can change our structure and our sense of balance. And so if we fall and we fracture, is it because our muscles aren't strong enough? So muscle strength is coming through. Muscles have always been around, but what I see in the literature is a huge influx, especially over these past 2 years, much more about muscle that we didn't know. And people are starting to realize that, wow, muscle's really smart. It's like a brain. We think of like the brain. This is a processing unit. The muscle is super smart, and this muscle is loaded with mitochondria. Mitochondria gives us energy. So that was number 2. And then number 3 was exploration into light. And what do I mean by that? So we just wrote a paper on melatonin and looking at darkness deficiency. And if people have, if we think about nighttime when people are still on their phones, they're still on their computer, that's not so good because it doesn't give the pineal gland a chance to produce melatonin to signal healthy sleep. And what we're learning, I was just looking at some papers last night, blue light may actually accelerate skin aging. So I think about like when all these people are on the computer and they are with their face, their neck, they're all exposed. It's like we need that, and that's why I've got blue light blocking glasses for at night when I'm on the computer. It's daytime now, it's like noon. And then you can also change the screen intensity so you don't have so much brightness. Now, blue light in the morning is good, but blue light at night is not so good. So I think we're going to learn more about circadian rhythm. Our skin on its own has its own circadian rhythm. We have clock genes. We have the pineal gland that signals to circadian rhythm. Our eyes are especially in tune with circadian rhythm. So looking at light and dark as medical overlays to everything that we're doing, because our exposure to light and dark is informing our hormones. It's informing our sleep patterns. It's informing our eating patterns. And I do think we're going to see more. We're going to see more in the way of interventions about light, like laser therapies. So many things are starting to be done with light rather than invasive technologies, which I think is kind of neat.
Yeah, that is neat. Wow, that is incredible. Do you have a little bit more than that you can share with us about light? I also want to kind of circle back to those postbiotics too, because I think that this is a new term that a lot of people probably haven't heard of.
Well, let's break down the term. Post is something that comes after, and then biotics is life. So the microorganisms that live within us, like what are they making? So what comes after, what are their metabolites? So, and that could be things like acids that they're making. It could be neurotransmitters. In fact, there's another term, psychobiotics. Psychobiotics refers to certain of these microorganisms that are actually producing neurotransmitters, things like GABA, which relate to anxiety, dopamine, which relate to that sense of reward, or even serotonin. So that's really exciting. So just imagine that if you want a certain health profile, which may involve the mind and how we think, we may be taking in certain psychobiotics to inform the gut to give us that type of microbial signature to allow us to change our template. And that's actually already been done. And it continues to be done. And I think it will continue as we start to look at disease imprints that they have a certain signature within the gut. Like maybe we can actually undo and help with certain disease states, or at least alleviate some of those symptoms by changing up that microbial pattern. So I'm excited about that. And then as far as light, most people aren't in tune with light. They don't think about the lighting in their home.
Mhm.
Their sleeping room needs to be absolutely dark. You need good blinds. And I know for some people they say, well, but Deanna, I want to leave a light on because if I have to get up and go to the bathroom, I don't want to fall. So yeah, you have to think about that. You may even want to think about like a motion sensor kind of light, or even like a small night light. But in general, when it comes to being, we're in winter right now,
Mhm.
and nature is telling us we need more darkness now, which probably tells us we need to prepare. If we look at 2 in the morning, between 2 and 4 in the morning, this time frame generally syncs up with the height of our rejuvenation and repair processes. So melatonin is at its peak, and melatonin is more than a hormone. It's actually a very potent antioxidant. It is anti-inflammatory, and it regulates the mitochondria. And in addition to melatonin being at its peak, we also have glutathione, and a number of the different antioxidant enzymes at their peak at 2 in the morning. So if somebody is not sleeping well or doesn't get that general peak of like melatonin and all of those, then they can't repair and feel well rested in the morning, right? So we really
Right.
sleep is a big deal. And the times that we're not awake are just as important as when we are awake. So just like nighttime and daytime are both equally important. It's not like, it's a contest to see if you can get the least amount of sleep and stay awake. And, I think now as an adult, when I was younger, I thought about like, as a teenager, it's like, I want to stay up late. I don't need so much sleep. And, you kind of shift your sleeping pattern to like going to bed later, waking up later. But
Mhm.
then I think I'm in my 50s now, and in my 50s, I kind of feel like, I'm going to bed early and I'm going to wake up early. And if you look at the studies, morningness, meaning that when we shift our activities more to morning time, this is more beneficial relative to sleeping late and then going to bed late. Right.
Mhm.
So I know everybody has their personalized rhythm, and I acknowledge that. I'm just speaking to what's in the science, and what the research in general says is kind of like, if you can get exposure to that first morning light and kind of go off and running, get your breakfast, get your morning activity. In fact, I just shared a study last night in my Facebook group that was it looks specifically, I think they were just looking at men, and they had them do different activity, and they found that morning activity was more parasympathetic, or more relaxing in the end,
Mhm.
and evening activity was more sympathetic, or revving up, right?
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So we have to think about the time of day that we even exercise based on the effects that we want. Now, some people could say, well, I don't have time to exercise in the morning. Well, it is better to exercise than not, but maybe we tailor the activity to be a little bit down, like maybe we're not on the Peloton, like sweating, and we're 2 hours and working and getting like a lot of sympathetic overdrive. Maybe it's more like we do a yoga class at night. We do
Mhm.
things to kind of bring us closer into that nighttime bedtime state.
Yes, to get that good night's sleep. I know that's really important for me. That and sleeping in the dark has always been a thing for me ever since I was a child.
Yeah,
Yes. Is
really
there
essential.
is there anything that we haven't discussed that you would like to share with our audience today?
Gosh, there's so much, but I would say, essentially that I think we covered a lot of ground
We did.
because we got through color, we got through different trends, we talked about creativity, which is important. And typically my three principles for eating are color, creativity, and variety, and we talked about all three. So I'm a happy camper.
Nice. Awesome. That's fantastic. So what is one little jewel of wisdom you can leave us with today?
Be your colorful self, whatever that entails. Just recently I ran a program in my group about your rainbow vibration. And people have
Love
asked me,
that.
well, what does that mean, rainbow vibe? Well, when we are our physical is hitting on all cylinders, our emotions are on all cylinders, mental, spiritual, where we feel completely full tilt and synced up, aligned, you know, how do we be more fully who we are in all of our many colors? The red of our being grounded, the orange, the playful, the yellow, the burst of fire that we bring to the world in our accomplishments, the shiny gold star, the green healing energy, speaking our truth, intuiting our wisdom, and then clarifying and connecting. I feel like when all of those systems are open, you know, um, to really engage and allow ourselves to find our inner colorful journey.
I love that. Thank you so much, Deanna. It's been such a pleasure to host you. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been very informative, and I think it's going to be a great additional start to the new year for season 4
Oh,
this year. So
fabulous.
thank you. Yes, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Liz.
It's been great to have you.
My
And thank
pleasure.
you, thanks. And thank you everyone for joining us. Again, I'm Liz Peterson, and this is Raise the Vibe with Liz. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Raise the Vibe with Liz. And my website is lizshealingtouch.com. Have a great day, everybody. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe. Thanks for joining us.